Hi, everyone. I'm State Representative Mike Marin. Thank you for joining us this morning. I'm here today with my colleagues, Representative Avery Bourne and Representative Patrick Windhorst, to talk about one of the biggest issues facing our state today, and that issue is corruption. For decades, state government has fostered a culture of corruption that has led to scandal after scandal. It is time that we finally hit the reset button on this draconian system that has led to scandal after scandal. During my short tenure in Springfield, all I've seen is a majority party taking a go-it-alone approach to cleaning up this mess, ignoring real reforms and instead passing meaningless reforms that don't get to the root of the problem. A lot of times these large omnibus bills pass in the middle of the night with absolutely no input from our caucus or from the public. All this gets us is watered down legislation, providing the people with little more than a nice press headline, with actually not doing anything to address the fundamental issues that are plaguing the State House. Currently, one of the largest bribery schemes in the history of the state continues to unfold in the headlines. The investigation into ComEd and Public Official A is a prime example of why Illinois needs change. In February of 2020, I called on then Speaker Madigan to address this issue for the people of the state. But of course, we saw nothing and complete inaction and failed leadership on this very important issue. Unsurprisingly, former Speaker Madigan had no appetite for positive change in dealing with corruption. Good government reform groups in Illinois have spoken out about the current bill, agreeing that it does not go far enough and doesn't even scratch the surface on meaningful ethics reforms that our state drastically needs. We need to bring integrity back to our government and continue to prove that we are listening to people and that we take their concerns seriously. And we need to do this because we need to gain faith and trust back in state government because people have lost that faith and trust. I came to Springfield to bring honest, hardworking perspective from the 104th District to the heart of Illinois government. And I've been a vocal advocate protecting the rights and integrity of our district and the people that call Illinois home. Today, I'm calling on my Democratic House colleague to come to the table to work with us, to work with our caucus on meaningful, comprehensive ethics reform that focuses on transparency and common sense. It's time for my colleagues on the other side of the aisle to join me and our Republican members in standing up for these hardworking Illinoisans and say enough is enough. Now I will turn it over to my friend and colleague, Representative Avery Bourne.
Thank you so much. I'm Avery Bourne, State Representative for the 95th District from Morrisonville. Good morning. I'm here to join my colleagues in calling for true, meaningful ethics reform and strong anti-corruption safeguards to be put in place. I don't have to state again, I think what Representative Marin stated so clearly, the urgent need in Illinois for true and meaningful ethics reform. But this bill that we may take up tomorrow in the legislature, Senate Bill 539, falls extremely short. And this isn't something new. We brought up many of our concerns with this bill in the debate on the House floor. Suggestions like, why in the world under your bill are legislators still allowed to lobby the city of Chicago? This isn't just an anecdote. We literally know that there are legislators who will still be able to lobby the city of Chicago if this bill goes into place. And during the Senate's press conference on this bill, they said that loophole was a suggestion of their colleagues who wanted to continue to lobby the city of Chicago. Under this bill, there's a loophole. They say that this bill will create a revolving door ban so that lawmakers can't immediately go and lobby their colleagues, but we know that there's a loophole that they would be able to. And most concerning to me and to our caucus is the lack of independence of the legislative inspector general. If we are ever going to get true and meaningful anti-corruption reforms in Illinois and true accountability for politicians, we need an independent legislative inspector general. The bill that they passed, Senate Bill 539, actually takes away some of the jurisdiction of the legislative inspector general and limits the scope of the investigations that she can investigate. It also doesn't include any of the really important reforms that she and previous legislative inspectors general have requested. These were concerns that we brought up on the House floor, but our concerns were then realized when Legislative Inspector General Pope announced her resignation following the passage of this bill, saying that her office is essentially a paper tiger. It was not a legislative priority to pass real ethics reform. And I think this should really be a call to lawmakers to wake up and pass something that isn't window dressing, but will actually get to the foundational problems that allow this culture of corruption in Springfield. That's why our caucus stands opposed to this bill. We need something that will actually make a change. And to make matters worse, the governor had the opportunity to use his amendatory veto power to change this bill and take away some of those parts that limit the legislative inspector general. But instead, the only change he made is a move to get rid of a federal hiring monitor over his agencies. So he's actually trying to bring less oversight to his own agencies through his amendatory veto. This is totally unacceptable to our caucus. We need something that is true and meaningful. I will join my colleagues in calling for Representative Burke and others to re-engage in true negotiations with our caucus to pass something that will really turn the tide in Springfield and give people faith in state government again. But we're not just calling on this. We actually have put forward dozens of proposals of our own throughout the years. We have some that are ready to go, could be voted on immediately. And for that, I will turn it over to my colleague, Patrick Windhorst.
Thank you, Avery. Good morning. I'm 118th District State Representative Patrick Windhorst from Metropolis. I'm going to talk a little bit about the legislation that passed in the spring session that was amendatory vetoed by Governor Pritzker, as well as legislation that I've sponsored that would significantly enhance and strengthen the watered-down ethics bill awaiting veto override action. Going back just 2 years ago, Mike Madigan was Speaker of the House, and several Democratic politicians were engulfed in swirling corruption scandals as FBI raids, indictments, arrests, and prison sentences seemingly made weekly news. In his January 2020 State of the State address, Governor Pritzker said, "It's no longer enough to sit idle while under the table deals, extortion, or bribery persist. Protecting the culture, or tolerating it is no longer acceptable. We must take action to restore the public's trust in our government." Now, I was appointed to be a member of the General Assembly's Joint Commission on Ethics and Lobbying Reform, which was created in response to the arrests and investigations of 2019. The commission met for several months and heard testimony and evidence from various witnesses. We finished most of our work, all except for completing and submitting our final report to the General Assembly. Despite other House and Senate committees finding a way to meet electronically, and despite my pleas and those of my colleagues, House and Senate Democrats leading the commission did not produce a final report or even meet with the commission to discuss it. Now, the latest iteration of ethics reform passed in an omnibus bill that I voted for back in May of 2021. That legislation was the only chance legislators had to vote on ethics reforms this year. I, along with others, had objections to that legislation because it did not go as far as was recommended during our commission hearings. But ultimately, many House Republicans voted yes because it was the only opportunity we thought we might ever have to codify at least some reform. Now, House Republicans believe that if the governor was serious about making good on his promise that protecting the culture of corruption is no longer acceptable, he should have used his amendatory veto power to enhance the weaker provisions of the bill. However, when Governor Pritzker's staff discovered a technical issue with the legislation, the governor issued only a narrow amendatory veto. Last spring, I filed House Bill 3396, an ethics omnibus bill that compiles many of the dozens of bills presented by Republican members, as well as taking into account the information we received from the Joint Commission on Ethics and Lobbying Reform. That bill sits in the Rules Committee. House Bill 3396 contains several provisions that would be improvements on the bill that passed the General Assembly this past spring. First, it would strengthen the revolving door prohibition. As we noted, the current version that passed the General Assembly is weak. It only has a 6-month provision, which has a very large loophole, meaning that once the General Assembly ends, an individual is then free, or former legislator is then free to begin lobbying, which could even be the next day. House Bill 3396 sets that time period at 1 year or the end of a person's term in office, whichever is longer. Second, House Bill 3396 gives more power to the Legislative Inspector General. It allows the LIG to have subpoena power without the approval of the Legislative Ethics Commission. It also requires that founder reports of the LIG be made public unless a 3/4 vote of the Legislative Ethics Commission would prevent it. In contrast, the Democrats' ethics legislation so impaired the LIG's ability to do her job that our current Legislative Inspector General submitted her resignation after the legislation passed, pointing out significant deficiencies in the bill in her letter of resignation. And finally, another note on local lobbying reform. Our bill would have a complete prohibition on local lobbying for compensation by a member of the General Assembly. It would not contain the loophole that exists in the Democratic legislation that passed this spring. In summary, our legislation provides tougher ethics and corruption reforms that we believe is necessary, and that was justified by the presentation and evidence we heard in the Joint Commission on Ethics and Lobbying Reform. We'd now be happy to take any questions.
Perfect. Thank you all so much. So like I mentioned earlier, please text me your questions if you can, and then we will get to them. And if we don't get to them today, just please email us, email me or Colleen afterwards, and we'll be happy to get to them. The first question we have is from Mike Militich. If this bill doesn't pass tomorrow, nothing will be done to address ethics. Is it better to wait a few months for a stronger ethics overhaul, or pass this plan to get some changes made quickly and improve on that later on?
I would like to weigh in on that one. So I think the greatest crisis that we face on all levels of government currently is the fact that the people don't trust us anymore. The people don't believe in the institutions that run their country, that run their state, that run local government. And there's a lot of reasons why people don't trust us anymore. For instance, when the governor runs on a promise that he's going to veto a partisanly drawn map, and then he signs the first partisanly drawn map that crosses his desk, people lose faith in government. I can't think of anything more cynical or something that would cause the public to lose faith in us more than passing a bill that is supposed to solve an ethics problem, which has plagued the state for years, that everybody is really upset about. And then at the end of the day, it changes nothing. After we say that we fixed the problem, and it really does nothing to change anything. That would cause such a lack of faith and confidence in us that it would be unforgivable. And so I don't think, given the circumstances of where we're at right now, I don't think that we can do that. We have to be honest with people, and we have to take meaningful reform. And the speaker likes to talk about a new day, and we're all for it. But it's time for him to actually put up or shut up at this point. We're all ready to come to the table and get this done. And this shouldn't be a partisan issue. From the far right to the far left, and everybody in between should be able to agree on these issues of transparent and good government. And so, it's just a problem of motivation at this point. We're willing to sit down today and have these discussions and get something passed that's meaningful in veto session. We just have to have the motivation on the opposite side of the aisle.
Yeah, I'd like to add that when the Democrats want to do something, they make it happen. That's why we're being called back allegedly to session tomorrow, is because they want to pass an energy bill. If you think back to the governor's first year, he had to pass the minimum wage increase by February 15th, which is not anywhere near, it wasn't effective until the next year. So if the Democrats are serious about something, they will do it. What they've shown is that they're not serious about passing true ethics reform. We've called for renewed negotiations. We have language we are prepared to offer them that's been filed in bill form This shouldn't take long. If Democrats wanted to do something, they could. Saying this is our only option is a false choice.
Thank you. From Greg Bishop at the Center Square. For Republicans that voted for this in the spring, but voted against it last week, what is the reasoning? What's different other than the governor's requested change?
I can take that. One thing that's very different now versus when it was passed in the spring is that the Legislative Inspector General has said that she is unable to complete her duties with this bill, that she's no longer able to be an effective watchdog over the legislature, which should be a huge wake-up call to the legislature on both sides of the aisle that this isn't nearly enough. We cannot disempower the Legislative Inspector General, and this bill, I think now we know, will actually make things in Illinois worse than the status quo.
Perfect. And then another question, and this is the last question I have so far. So if anybody has anything, please text it to us right now. Peter Hancock at Capital News. Do the provisions in the proposed energy bill address some of your concerns? And where is the Republican caucus on the energy bill? If any of you want to take that.
Look, I think this issue of ethics is much larger. It's systemic. It transcends just the issues that we've seen with ComEd. So, I think we have to deal with this in a holistic fashion and address the culture of corruption that exists in Springfield that pertains to other legislation, not just energy. And as far as where we're at as a caucus, I think there's a lot of us that are open-minded, but we want to see, what provision gets, proposed, what we're voting on, because we've seen all kinds of different versions, all kinds of different bills that are out there. So I think at the end of the day, we're all just kind of wondering what bill we're going to be voting on. And, we're waiting to see what comes up tomorrow or whenever it comes up.
All right. That was all the questions we got. Thank you guys all for participating today. And if you guys have follow-ups, please send them over my way. We'll be happy to answer any outstanding questions. And otherwise, I'm sure we will be talking to you all tomorrow. So in the meantime, have a great day.